Hello again. My name is Jeff Farbman from the Wallace Center at Winrock International. Welcome to another National Good Food Network webinar. Our program today, one-page cost-benefit analysis tool, will introduce you to a way to think clearly and financially when considering a new purchase. This is another in the growing one-page tools designed by Farm Credit. There are links to the other one-page tools and their associated webinars on the archive page for today's webinar. This webinar is made possible with support from the USDA Risk Management Agency. We are working with a host of organizations on that project, including the Indigenous Food and Agriculture Initiative at University of Arkansas School of Law, Farm Credit East Central Oklahoma, Farm Credit Council, Morse Marketing Connections, the Choctaw and Muskogee Creek Nations, and the Muskogee Food Sovereignty Institute. Okay, so let me welcome you and tell you a little bit about the Wallace Center. The Wallace Center, a business unit of Winrock International, is the host of the NGFN webinar series. The Wallace Center has been a leading organization in the movement for a more sustainable and equitable food system for over 25 years. Today, the center supports entrepreneurs and communities as they build a new 21st century food system that is healthier for people, the environment, and the economy. The center serves the growing community of civic, business, and philanthropic organizations involved in building a new good food system in the United States. In particular, we're focused on advancing regional, collaborative efforts around the country to move good food, healthy, green, fair, affordable food beyond the direct marketing realm into larger scale wholesale channels. The National Good Food Network, or NGFN, is an initiative of the Wallace Center. It is structured as a network of networks ensuring efficient flow of information and innovation from boots on the ground projects to the national level and back down to the grassroots level across the nation. The Wallace Center coordinates and supports the network. Our goals are to work with the growers to ensure that there is an abundant supply of good food to meet the high consumer demand for the product, to collect and disseminate the best models, stories, methods, and outcomes, and to ensure that policymakers are informed about the wonderful successes our network and partners have had so that we can continue to increase support for regional healthy food. You can learn more about the great work of the National Good Food Network and dig into our resources to help your work on our website, ngfn.org. We have a great set of panelists today. I'm going to introduce them all up front so that they can give you a great show without me coming in to break their rhythm. So first, Gary Madison works for the Farm Credit Council in Washington, D.C., which is the trade organization of the Farm Credit system. Farm Credit is a nationwide network of borrower-owned lending institutions providing credit for the nation's farmers and ranchers. As the Vice President for Young Beginning Small Farmer Programs and Outreach, Gary seeks to identify and meet the needs of the next generation of farmers and ranchers as part of Farm Credit's enduring mission of service to agriculture and rural America. Farm Credit provided some $7.7 billion to young farmers, $12 billion for beginning farmers, and $14.2 billion in financing for small farmers in the recent year. Until recently, Gary was a small farmer operating a wholesale greenhouse business in New Hampshire, raising cattle for the local freezer beef market. He holds bachelor's degrees in agronomy and biology from the University of Connecticut. Since 2013, Professor Janie Hipp has served as the director of the Indigenous Food and Agriculture Initiative and with the companion title of Visiting Professor of Law. Prior to joining the School of Law, she was the Senior Advisor for Tribal Relations to Thomas Vilsack, Secretary of the U.S. Department of Agriculture. She is the founder of the USDA's Office of Tribal Relations in the Office of the Secretary and served 2 terms on the USDA's Secretary's Advisory Committee for Beginning Farmers and Ranchers. She is an LLM graduate of the University of Arkansas Law School's Agricultural and Food Law program. She holds a JD from Oklahoma City University and a BA in Social Work from the University of Oklahoma. I should also mention that Janie is Chickasaw. And Bo Sheffield has 5 years of experience with Farm Credit. He grew up in Gore, Oklahoma, near his family's farming operation, which consisted primarily of corn, wheat, and soybeans. Bo graduated from Oklahoma State University with a bachelor's degree in agribusiness in 2008. Upon graduation, Bo worked for a couple of financial institutions before joining Farm Credit East Central Oklahoma. Currently, Bo is a member of the Broken Arrow, Oklahoma lending staff as an assistant vice president, where he works directly with producers, assisting them with their agricultural financing needs. And Bo is a member of Cherokee Nation. I also wanted to mention that John Sutterfield, Senior Vice President of Farm Credit East Central Oklahoma, is also in the room for support and answering questions. So without further ado, Janie, take it from here.
Thanks, Jeff. It's great to be with everybody today. We're just going to jump right into the slides. We've got a lot to cover today, and we're very happy that you joined us. We see quite a few folks who have familiar to probably many of us that are speaking today, and so we're giving you a shout out just to get us started. But our whole series here for the last several months has been focusing on financial planning, business planning, with also some legal issues associated with farming and ranching kind of thrown in. But what we have found very helpful are some tools that that Farm Credit has been very much in the middle of developing over time, and we've found that they're quite useful to farmers, no matter whether you're just starting out or whether you've been at it a while and just need refreshers for just doing as well as you possibly can in running your business. So we're going to jump right in. Wonderful picture of some really wonderful looking vegetables. It makes me want to go shopping right now. But that's what we're talking about, is getting us all into a place where that sort of picture is something we see very often, and we have as many vibrant farms and ranches that we have as possible. So where we're headed. The big plan, the concept of business planning, is sort of an overarching theme for today. It has been the theme for all of our sessions that we've had in this series. We're getting down to the magic number, the issue of gross margin. Gary and Bo are going to take us on that journey very deeply. The little plan, the cost-benefit analysis itself. Hang with us here, because these kind of concepts are going to be made clear when we start dipping into the actual one-page documents and that you'll have access to, as Jeff indicated. But we're going to walk you through those kinds of analysis tools in just a second. Then we're going to switch to legal issues. You'll hear a little bit more from me about exposure to risks and how that also folds into the ideas of developing your own cost-benefit analysis. It's not all about the numbers. It is also about other issues related to the viability of your business long term. And then some issues related to just risk management itself. Jeff, could you swing in here and help me with some slides? Thank you. For some reason, I lost control. One of the things we talk about in all of these sessions is the important idea of knowing yourself. What are your skills? What are your tolerance for risk? What is your capacity to deal with ambiguity in your own operation, in your own business? What is your capacity to lead others? You have that role when you're in an ongoing farming, ranching operation. And then what is your capacity for self-discipline? Because as you'll see when we dig into the numbers, it really takes you, it's necessary that you stay on top of these sorts of issues so that the financials of your own business don't really get away from you over time. So knowing yourself is one of those ideas that a lot of folks don't talk about, but it is really a precursor to digging into these numbers and to the analysis tools. And I love how Gary says this. He let me say it today, but he says it very well, and he's so right about it. When you are in the process of knowing yourself, you need to know also that, particularly in the area of farming and ranching and food businesses, or any business for that matter, there's 3 basic business skills that folks need to have, and they fall into these broad categories of financial skills, production skills, and marketing skills. And he's right. This is a slide that he developed, and the minute I saw it, I said yes. But you're really lucky if you have 2 of these skills. And some of the skills, it's much easier to partner with or hire a skill that you don't have. Many folks will have the production skills and some, measure of financial skills, but they might not be so good at the marketing side. But that slide I love to point at quite a bit because I've seen it many, many times over the years that I've been involved in this work, that it's the unique person that has all three of these skills wrapped into one person. It's also important when you're going on this journey to really think through how you define success. You're going to have lots of different ways that you personally define success, not only for you as a person, but for you as a part of a family, for instance, or as a part of a business. But when you're actually talking about the business aspects of being in farming and ranching, then defining success really requires you to have enough profit to meet your own personal and financial goals for not only you and your family, but for your business. And so it really does require you to, at some level, keep an eye on the numbers and use some tools that can help you get to where you need to go or want to go in terms of how you define success. So Gary?
Thanks, Janie. So this may be your vision of success, the kind of farm operation that you want to have. Whatever your vision is, hopefully what we're going to try to do today is give you a tool to be able to more confidently get to that vision, to take the things that you've got, the assets that you have, and turn them into the vision that you would like to have. The presentation that we're going through today is, if many of you are going to look at this and say, I think I've been here before. There's a whole deja vu thing going on. We're going to get to the cost-benefit analysis tool, but it's important to understand the main concept of the, or one of the concepts anyway, of the one-page business plan in order to be able to really understand how the numbers work on the cost-benefit analysis tool. So in general, we're headed to a place where it gets kind of mathy. So I'm just warning you ahead of time. But before we do that, we've got to do some looking at the process here of business planning so that we can get to that magic number of gross margin and have that really mean something to you rather than, gosh, there's another one of those financial terms I don't understand. So you may have seen this before. There's a webinar that is archived at the National Good Food Network website that is about the one-page business plan. And so if you're joining this for the first time, I'm going to go through this quite quickly, and you may want to refer to that archived webinar in order to get a little bit better feel for what the one-page business plan is. But I'd point out right across the middle of the slide there, writing down goals that are specific, measurable, attainable, rewarding, and timed is really the core message, most important message of this one-page business plan. This is a template that is about thinking and is about the concept. Please don't think that you can fill one of these in and go to Bo Sheffield and ask him for a loan for a tractor or something. This is a concept page to help you think through, so what do I need to write about in my business plan? This is kind of where you can take notes on that. And we'd suggest that the topics that you need to address in a business plan are these. These are 4 of the 5 risk management areas. The one that is not on here is legal. By the time you're through with this presentation and Janie's through whipping you about it, you're going to be really worried about the legal aspect, but I chose to leave it off of this. The business that we're going to be talking about, using as an example through today, is Tyler's Tip Top Tomatoes. You can see that this is a one-page business plan that's filled in. It's got examples in the first column of a people-related goal, achieving an appropriate balance of work and home life. Column 2 has an objective that's related to financial goals. Column 3, production goals. Column 4, marketing goals. So you can see an example of each of those. If you we're actually filling out a one-page business plan as practice for drawing up a full-blown business plan, you'd probably want to fill out several pages about people and several pages about production goals and how you're going to achieve them. These, again, are just examples to show you you don't have to write a whole lot, but once you get some of these ideas written down, you'll find that using this tool of this way to think about business planning by starting with an objective of what you want to do and then filling in specific goals and then what are you going to do about it, an action plan, is really a pretty effective way to plan for your future. And then finally, the other side of the one-page business plan is this one-page financial plan. And I'm going to concentrate on the box in the lower left-hand corner, which I'd call a 5-line income statement. You can see that this, which is also downloadable from the NGFN webinar archive site, this page has a lot of directions on it to help you get through filling out the box on the left and the box on the right. I'm going to concentrate on this one on the left. It says historical. It's got the arrow pointing to gross margin. This is a formula. If you look on the left-hand side of that box on the left side, right under historical, it says sales minus cost of goods sold equals gross margin minus overhead equals net profit. That's the basic formula of this 5-line income statement. This is something you should know about your business. You should be able to tell me that. If you were describing to me your business in an elevator speech, you had half a minute to tell me what your business is. If you told me this, I'd really understand your business pretty well. And particularly if you told it to me in percent of sales, because then I can compare what you're telling me to any other business that you may be able to describe or I may be able to think of, from the pizza parlor down the street to the local gas station to Walmart or Target or the local grocery store. All businesses can express their way of doing business, what makes them tick within these lines of the 5-line income statement. So simply, it's total sales of Tyler's Tip Top Tomatoes, our example business. Tyler's Tip Top Tomatoes is a pretty small business. It only has sales of $134,400 a year, and Tyler's Tip Top Tomatoes, of course, is a made-up business. It's actually made up from combining the information from about 20 other farms in the Northeast that do this kind of business that would be fairly small and selling vegetables, locally produced vegetables, as a CSA or community supported agriculture type marketing arrangement, or through a farm stand, or at farmers markets, or most commonly through 2 or more of those methods. The cost of goods sold to produce those $134,000 worth of sales are $80,000. The cost of goods sold is a fancy way of saying anything you're going to spend in 1 year. So things related to labor that you pay other people, to seed or fertilizer, or supplies that are only going to be with you for a year. Rubber bands, bags, who knows what you need to sell stuff at a farmer's market. All those kinds of things are cost of goods sold. So the very simple part, the top 3 lines of this 5-line income statement, sales minus cost of goods sold equals your gross margin. The reason to separate this out, to say what a gross margin is that gives you a number that tells you how efficient you are at turning money in supplies into dollars worth of sales. So in this case, if you give me 60 cents, look at cost of goods sold. If you give me 60 cents, I'll give you $1 worth of sales of vegetables. That's how good I am at being a producer. So the inverse of that 60% means the gross margin is 40%. That's the magic number. You're going to see this red arrow pop up again. That 40%, knowing that number of your business, allows you to do forward-looking budgeting without having to go through the whole exercise of figuring out. So if I grow 50% more vegetables, how much more is it going to cost me to grow those vegetables? So if I increase my sales by, let's say, $70,000, I can just multiply that by 40% and come up with, well, that's what it's going to cost me. That's what the cost of goods sold will be, because I know that that gross margin for my business is 40%. It's a quick and dirty sort of way of being able to budget into the future. Once you know your gross margin, it's your efficiency of production. Your overhead, and you can see this is a very low overhead, 8%, is because Tyler's Tip Top Tomatoes actually operates on rented land. They don't own anything. For land, they have very few overhead costs, which would include things like interest payments or repairs or taxes and insurance. That leaves a net profit that is astoundingly high at 33%, and that's because we have not counted the owner's contribution to labor. That comes out of this net profit. If you took out paying yourself for labor, the net profit here would be about 10%. The important thing about this this 5-line income statement is, here it is again, just without the directions on there, is that this gross margin number of 40% is what allows you to do projections into the future, to say, to add up all of those various costs of fertilizer and seed and rubber bands, all the things that you use in 1 year that are a cost of goods sold or a variable cost. You add together all those things, your electricity bill, the amount you pay your hired labor, all of that. In order to project into the future, you can just use this gross margin number rather than trying to figure out how many more seeds you need or how many more hours of labor you need in order to make a projection into the future. So again, this is its gross margin is that magic number, and it is a gross measure. It's not real exact in terms of, but it's close enough for budgeting. The point of all this, as far as going through the one-page business plan and now this one-page financial plan with a 5-line income statement, is to communicate the idea that you can understand your business performance in a fairly small financial statement like this, a 5-line income statement, and that for budgeting purposes, you need to know your gross margin. Now, you can.
Gary, do you mind if I interrupt for a second? There's a good question here. Most of the time I like to save the questions for the end, but because so much of the rest of the presentation in terms of the financial analysis comes from this gross margin, I wanted to bring this question up to have you address it now. Anthony says gross margin varies dramatically, particularly in the produce business, because you may spend the same on materials and supply and labor from one year to the next, yet frosts, floods, disease, etc. may change your production and therefore sales substantially. So how do you come up with an accurate representative gross margin?
This is a benchmarked gross margin. As I said, is a compilation of financial information from about 20 farms. The situations that you describe as far as frost, floods, disasters are not something that you budget for in the sense of, wow, I'm going to plan to have a really bad year this coming year. You try to budget for your average performance, and as you keep records over time, even including those years that you have spectacularly bad luck, those really become part of your gross margin record over time. For the purpose of budgeting, using a benchmark a benchmark figure like this is entirely appropriate because you should plan for, you should budget for average performance, which is what this benchmarking is, but you should certainly, in your production strategies and your actual performance, you should always try to perform at an excellent level, even though you're budgeting for an average level, if that makes sense. So with respect to what about a disaster? Well, when you budget, you are budgeting for average performance. The other side of the equation, as far as risk management and how to handle what happens if things do go badly, is more of what Janie is going to be talking about later on in the presentation, which would include solutions potentially like crop insurance or an off-farm job, savings. There are lots of ways to manage, if not mitigate, the risk of having a really bad year. Good question. Let's so as far as one last thought here, as far as what can you believe of these figures that I'm showing you? These are as a % of sales. These figures are based on performance of a sample of farms in the Northeast that have had pretty consistent results at this level, such that this is what would be expected for a smaller scale vegetable farm, something maybe up between 40,000 or 400 or even $1 million worth of sales is probably going to be pretty close to these percentages, with the exception of that net profit number, which is going to vary once you start adding in the owner's labor cost. So with that, let me turn it to Bo and have Bo explain more clearly about what exactly cost benefit can do for you.
Yes, I'd have confidence, I guess, that we're on here. This is Bo Sheffield. Again, I'm with Farm Credit, East Central Oklahoma, located near Tulsa. And I'm sitting here today with John Sutterfield, who's our Senior Vice President, 35 years lending experience. And I'm hoping that we can kind of go through this together and kind of go through the cost-benefit analysis and kind of give you folks a perspective from the lender's side of things. So we hope there's some questions out there, you know, maybe give you some examples of what we've run into in the past. But we'll jump to slide number 15 here. And what is cost-benefit analysis? The way we look at it, it's analysis of a part of your farm business to compare, or so you can compare the cost and benefits of change that may lie ahead. And you know, just a few of the examples as far as change go, maybe the option of purchasing a piece of equipment, or possible irrigation, as we'll talk about moving forward here, maybe a different marketing plan, whether you're selling to produce to a local farmer's market, or the way that you market your product, or maybe you know, building a new facility, something of that nature. As we move forward here to the next slide, kind of the way I view this is why do we do a cost-benefit analysis? Why does a producer, why would you need a cost-benefit analysis? And you know, the basics are is to help you to make an informed decision and examine all of the different aspects of your business and what may or may not be affected. It helps you determine solid reasoning to acquire the new item. As we had mentioned, those different items you know, that a producer may consider purchasing and adding to the business. As lenders, we often run into folks who just want something new. And one thing that we have to do is, you know, sit down with the producer and decide, truly is this new tractor that they're looking to purchase, how is it gonna benefit their business, or is it going to create a problem where maybe they can't afford it? And so that's one thing that we often have to visit with our customers and producers. Another thing is thoughtful process to identify all likely costs and all likely benefits. A lot of times we'll run into to producers that they maybe haven't thought about all the different aspects and all the different costs that are involved in improving their agriculture operations. So I feel like it's our job as a lender to truly sit down with that producer and maybe kind of look at things from the other side. What have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? And make sure when a producer is going to go out and take on a big expense, that it's truly something that's going to improve their bottom dollar. And then finally, the process applies to any business. And so here in Oklahoma, primarily the type of production that we deal with in agriculture is we have a lot of cow-calf producers, a lot of beef here in northeast Oklahoma. We also deal with some small grain farmers, corn, wheat, and soybeans, poultry, those type of agriculture products. But this cost-benefit analysis, again, you can use that in any type of business, whether you're in northeast United States or you're on the West Coast or here in Oklahoma. I'm going to let John Sutterfield talk a little bit about this next slide here.
This next slide, compare outcomes. These are some examples of some things you might be looking at a cost-benefit analysis for. Maybe you're looking at buying new equipment rather than repairing the old equipment that you have. And this is where cost-benefit analysis would really come in handy, and it should be used is when you're looking at that purchase. It could be several $1,000s as opposed to just a few $1,000s to repair something. Some other items there, new production practices, or keep doing what you're doing. An example would be maybe you want to do no-till planting. Well, that may involve buying a no-till drill. So you got to weigh in what that's going to cost you to operate that no-till drill and what the cost of that no-till drill is going to be, as opposed to going out and tilling your soil and planting it like you've been doing. Utilizing new markets or sell to the same folks. Maybe if you're a vegetable producer, maybe you're considering going to another farmer's market. Maybe you're already going 2 days a week, and maybe you're considering going 3 days a week. Well, what's that going to entail as far as buying additional equipment or time or what have you? Invest in a business or divest in a business. A lot of times we see this from a lender standpoint. There's sideline businesses that's going on, and sometimes we do have conversations with our customers about is that worthwhile and is it paying for itself? An example would be a small trucking business on the side in addition to the farming operation. The next slide there, cost-benefit analysis. We'll get it pulled up here. Your cost-benefit analysis, what we're doing here is we're weighing our benefits with our cost. You're going to have, with this new purchase or this change in your operation, you'll have new or additional revenue, or in some cases you may be able to gain some efficiencies and reduce your cost or maybe eliminate cost. We see that a lot of times when we're visiting with customers, but then you got to weigh that benefit with what the cost is going to be. So at the end of the day, what you're trying to do is determine how much benefit you're going to gain and then what it's going to cost you to gain those benefits. And at the end, you're trying to affect that bottom line, and hopefully that you're going to have a net benefit when it's all said and done, which is going to affect your overall profit margin. And I think we're going to turn it back to Gary at this point.
Thanks, John. So Tyler's Tip Top Tomatoes, selling at farmers markets, selling at a farm stand. That's the model business that we're talking about. And using different marketing channels. And back to that idea of, Jeff, if you could advance the next slide, that would be helpful. There we are. Back to that. I told you we'd see that red arrow again. Back to that idea of gross margin. Remember, gross margin is how good you are, a measure of how good you are at taking inputs or cost of goods sold, or also known as variable costs. How good are you taking inputs and turning it into dollars of sales? Now let's see how we use that. In this project analysis for an irrigation system for Tyler's Tip Top tomatoes, starting up at the top, line A, B, and C, we've got a total cost of this irrigation system of $5,000. We expect it to last 5 years, which means it's going to be, we're going to assume a cost of $1,000 per year. That 5-year life, or calling it an annual depreciation cost of $1,000 per year, is not necessarily based on IRS tax sort of depreciation. It's the economic life of that irrigation system. That means that's how long that irrigation system is going to last before we have to do either major repairs or major upgrade. It's going to become worn out or clogged or whatever's going to happen to it. Somebody hit it with the lawnmower too many times. Whatever it is, it's going to last 5 years, giving us an annual cost of $1,000 per year. Then, in the second part of this, starting with line 1, estimating the additional revenue that we're going to get from installing this $5,000 irrigation system. And how I came up with this $8,000 in increased sales was by Googling, I Googled increase in tomato production with irrigation. And I got all sorts of answers that ranged from 2% to 40%. And I chose a rather more modest number of somewhere closer to 4%, 5%, and chose $8,000 as the likely increase I would get with irrigation. Here's where my gross margin comes in. If I'm going to increase my additional revenue by $8,000, if I'm going to have total sales increase of $8,000, I can multiply this by that 40%, my magic gross margin number, and I don't have to figure out, well, how many more seeds do I have to buy? How many more tomato stakes do I have to buy? How many more rubber bands or all of the other inputs? I don't have to figure that out. I use my gross margin number, and that gives me, on line 3, my additional gross margin I expect. I'm going to get $3,200 after taking out my cost of goods sold, which is that magic number, that gross margin number. And then after on line 3, after I figure that additional gross margin, I'm going to start subtracting the cost that I have. And so I've got that annual cost of $1,000 a year. I'm going to have to pay a little interest in order to buy this irrigation system. We'll call that $100 a year. Down to line 6, I've got some utilities, things like extra electricity to run that water pump a little longer so the irrigation system works, and some labor cost, that is additional labor to move the irrigation system around or clean filters or whatever has to be done. This is not the cost of labor that's harvesting the crop. That's figured up in that 40% gross margin. That's another one of those annual costs that is something we can just count on, that gross margin number to help us figure out what that labor cost is going to be. We don't have to identify it specifically. We can calculate all this based on, so how much more additional revenue am I going to get? And then we start subtracting out the costs. What that gives us after we subtract out all the costs is $3,200 from line 3 minus all those other costs gives us $1,700 on line 11. And then calculating an internal rate of return or a return on investment, in line 12, we take the $1,700 and divide it by our total cost of equipment up at the top on line A, and multiply by 100 to get a percent, turn it into a percentage, we get 34%. Again, why I'm counseling to put this into percentage terms is then you can compare it to something else. If I told you, gosh, my net income is going to be $1,700 and it's going to be, I don't know, $10,000 for some other investment, that really doesn't tell me which is a better investment, because that other investment may cost me a lot more money. If you express this rate on return or internal rate of return as a percentage, then you can compare something like a $5,000 irrigation system to a $50,000 tractor and come up with which is a better investment in percentage terms. Now, to understand what this 34% means, is that good or bad? I don't know. Well, let's think about it. If it's 34%, it takes about 3 34% in order to make 100%. Or another way to look at this, at 34% annual rate of return on investment, this irrigation system will pay for itself in 3 years. And remember, the expected life of this is 5 years. So I'm putting out the money, making the investment in the $5,000 irrigation system. It takes 3 years approximately to earn that money back, and then I can operate that irrigation system for the final 2 years and have even greater profitability because I don't have to pay that annual depreciation cost. I've already paid for it. So that's the basic premise of what we're doing here with a cost-benefit analysis that gives an internal rate of return. And I'd like to ask Bo to take over and help us through an example of a tractor. We've got a couple other examples here that we'll just skip over. These are going to be available for you for download. But Bo, can you walk us through this example?
Sure, thanks, Gary. As you had just mentioned there, the example that we are going to look at is the tractor and rototiller example. Tractor is a very common piece of equipment, especially here in Oklahoma, that we visit with producers about purchasing. One thing that we'll kind of get into possibly a little bit more, but again from a lender's perspective, it's very important. I mean, we'll talk about the economical life of the tractor, but one thing that we always stress to our producers is, like on a tractor, we're going to look at financing that, around 5, 6, 7 years. Certainly not to say that tractor cannot be used for 15, 20 plus years, but again, just trying to give you all an idea from a lender's perspective, a tractor is going to be financed to that 5 to 7 year mark. But in this particular analysis here, as we look at line A there at the top, the total cost of these two pieces of equipment here are going to be $50,000. We're going to have an expected economic life of these two items of 15 years. And on line C, an annual depreciation cost of $3,333 per year. If we skip down there to the bottom section and look at line 1, we're going to expect additional revenue, or Tyler's Tip Top Tomatoes is going to expect additional revenue of $50,000 if they are to make this investment in this tractor and rototiller. Gary's touched quite a bit on the gross margin of 40%. So if you multiply 50,000 by 40%, it's going to give you our additional gross margin of 20,000. And John's going to make a comment right here real quick.
I was going to comment, we're looking at the additional revenue of $50,000, but on this investment or cost benefit analysis, this producer is producing about 5 acres of tomatoes, and they're looking at if they can get this tractor, they can increase their production and actually produce maybe 10 acres of tomatoes. And that's why we're going to have additional revenue of $50,000 there. So this particular tractor is going to allow them to actually increase their production because they're going to take on some more acreage. I'll turn it back to Bo here.
Our annual depreciation cost on these items, again, we're looking at the economic life of 15 years, is going to be, we're going to subtract out $3,333. We're going to take into consideration our interest expense of $2,185, which of course this is under the assumption that this tractor and rototiller was purchased and financed through a lender such as Farm Credit. So you're going to take out your interest expense on those items, and then we are going to take a look here at our operating cost. If our utilities of $2,400, a lot of you may wonder what in the world is utilities here, but we're going to, I guess that John may interject here, but that's going to take into consideration your fuel expenses and just your.
In this example, it's the cost of operating this tractor. It says utilities, but I think it's $20 an hour for 120 hours there. It comes out $2,400. That's your tractor expense.
And then there underneath on line number 7, it's going to be your labor to operate this piece of equipment, which is going to be $1,800 that we're going to take out, and it leaves us with net income of $10,282, which is a calculated return on investment of 21%. So again, from a lender's perspective, we're going to take a look at this as by purchasing these two items, your net income could very potentially be increased by a little over $10,000. I think as a producer, one thing that you ought to keep in mind is that if you are going to finance this piece of equipment, again, I touched on it earlier, financing over the course of 5 to 7 years, a good portion of that net income is going to be used toward the principal payment of that item. So again, you've kind of got to look at things as, the money that you put in your pocket for the first 5, 6, 7 years is going to be pretty minimal. Now, hopefully the economic life of these pieces of equipment are going to be 15 plus years, and so your net income will continue to be around that $10,000 mark after that piece of equipment's paid off. So that is one thing that we often have to visit with our producers about is, hey, this is not a short-term investment where you're going to see a lot of money being put into your pocket in the next couple of years. You're going to have to get this item paid off, and then that's really where the reward comes.
Yeah, and I might add, typically we finance this type of equipment over 5 to 7 years. If you financed it over 5 years and it was $50,000, you're going to have a $10,000 a year principal payment that's not shown in this analysis. So your net income of $10,282 there is pretty much eaten up by the principal payment for those first 5 years. So, and those are things we look at, as Bo said, from a lender's perspective, and we discuss with our customers. I think these next examples are pretty much similar examples, the purchase of a walk-in cooler and then the vegetable wash station. You can kind of go down through those analysis, and they're just some more examples for you to look at and to compare and get familiar with and comfortable with doing some of these types of cost-benefit analysis. And this last slide, I believe you can download this.
Yeah, slide number 26, that is included, or there's obviously a blank one here. It's my understanding from Gary and Jeff that can be downloaded and printed off and used in other examples that you all may have to, look at different type of investments that might be, you all might be considering, and you can use the cost-benefit analysis to see if it's truly something that may benefit your current operation. Again, one other thing I might stress is, again, we often visit with producers that have a difficult time. They may have a list of items that they feel like that they need or that they want, and as a lender, I feel like that it's part of our job to help those producers make an informed and economic decision, something that will allow them to be able to justify it, and it's also feasible to them. So sometimes I feel more like a counselor than a loan officer. Certainly we don't have all the answers, nor is our recommendation always the right one for a particular producer, but we always try to help a producer make the right decision whenever they're considering investment, and we feel like that this cost-benefit analysis tool is something that will help them out in that process. So I believe now we're going to pass it on to Janie so she can discuss more of the legal issues.
So I'm back on, and Jeffrey, have you turned it over to me? Aha, yes. So thanks everybody for hanging with all the numbers. So I learn something new every time I sit with these folks from Farm Credit and walk through these tools. They're very, very helpful. And just as a matter of full disclosure, at one point I had a retail establishment myself, and these types of tools would have been very helpful to me if I'd had access to them at that time. So I just kind of throw that out there for folks on the line with us today, that it really doesn't matter whether you're in farming or ranching or a retail store or manufacturing. These kinds of things are just standard business practices that the sooner you come to terms and sort of think in the way of analyzing what you're trying to do with them in mind is, I think, the better off you'll be. But now we're looking a little bit at legal issues, and I would love to have you all on the line for the next 3 days and do a deep download into legal issues, but we're going to have to leave some of these issues for another day. But I did want to share with you all today that whenever you're actually considering the financial issues associated with buying a new cooler, installing a new irrigation system, installing a wash station, buying a new tractor, buying a new high tunnel production system, whatever it is you think you might be doing, you really need to stop and think also. If you think back to that early form that Gary had in his comments early on that had SMART goals, and it had personal, financial, marketing, and those kinds of columns to think through, I'd ask you to kind of download that form, leave it blank, and think about the legal pieces as well, because there can be, not always, but there can be legal issues that you need to think about and plan for that are attached to any of these examples or any other examples when you're trying to make changes in your operation. Are you borrowing money? First of all, we're assuming that you might be, although in some circumstances you might not be. You just might have some additional cash on hand, and you're trying to figure out whether it makes sense for you business-wise to put in that irrigation system that you can pay for all on your own. But particularly if you still should go through the process of a cost-benefit analysis just to see if it's a wise investment on your part. But particularly when you're going in to borrow money to pay for these equipment changes or improvements to your operation, borrowing money implies paying it back. And so being able to run through these numbers on paper, to be able to actually sit down with your lender, as both Bo and Gary have talked about, and really walk through these issues is really, really important to do. Because when you are undertaking a borrowing relationship, you're undertaking a contractual obligation to repay the money. And so anytime you're you're entering into that sphere, you have legal issues that immediately are a part of that transaction. Your lender is, in most circumstances, going to file liens on the equipment or property when you acquire debt, particularly if you're talking about debt in the range of, tens of thousands of dollars. That just comes with the territory. And whenever you do, enter into a contractual obligation to repay a debt, you should anticipate that a lien attaches to the property. You shouldn't be surprised by that. You need to read those documents that you're signing from start to finish. A lot of folks don't go through the process of doing that. They're just so happy that they're going to be able to embark on that next step that they really don't take the time to walk through the documents, ask questions, sit down with your lender and make sure that everybody understands all the terms that are involved in those documents, what they actually mean, what your responsibilities are. Anytime you're in this, the rule of thumb for me always is that no matter where you are in your farming and ranching or food operation, your records are going to be what keep you afloat. But particularly when you're dealing in a borrowing and lending relationship, it's just imperative that you keep great records, that you communicate regularly with your lender. If your assumptions that y'all both sat down and talked about aren't bearing out in the first 6 months, then that person is the first person you need to be talking with about it. Understanding all of the terms that are in those documents is extremely important. As a lawyer, I've dealt with more than one case over the life of my career of folks who didn't bother to call their lender when they actually thought, well, this isn't working out so well. I'm just going to take that tractor and sell it to somebody and recoup that because I've got some problems with cash flow right now or something. They get a little desperate. But the reality is that by doing that, if you are in a lending relationship, you have signed in those documents most often an agreement that you will not sell that collateral without permission of the lender because they've taken an interest in that collateral for potential repayment purposes. So just understanding your relationships when you're in that contractual borrower-lender relationship is very important because it does impact your actions later on. Records are going to save you all the time. They're maybe not going to save you if things really go bad, but at the end of the day, you need those records to really keep moving forward. And if your lender is, there with you for the long haul, those records are going to help you make the case that some other new arrangement needs to be made with regard to that piece of equipment or that irrigation system or that high tunnel system that y'all kind of talked through before. The other thing that you should think about when you're kind of determining these new improvements, if you will, for your operation is, why are you doing it? Are you doing it for you just want that new tractor, or are you actually doing it to get yourself into a new market? Have you been functioning just off of your own farm with a farm stand, or are you wanting to push off into a CSA or into a food hub or into a farmer's market? Or are you kind of, you've got enough product that you really are thinking that if you add that, new acreages with this tractor and these pieces of equipment to support that greater production, you can be more reliable in a restaurant market or a grocery store market, schools. I mean, you really need to think through what's the end game here, because each one of those venues has legal issues related to being in that market. For instance, you may, if you think you might want to add a piece of equipment or tweak your production system in order to get into, a set of regional schools that are close by your operation, very often those schools are going to require you to carry an insurance policy, or they're going to require you to have GAP certification. So you may be adding some additional costs to actually completing those requirements in order to be in that market. The same would hold true with grocery stores, any kind of retail market. If you're direct to a restaurant, those restaurant requirements are going to reveal themselves when you actually sit down and negotiate with that restaurant owner. If it's a chain of restaurants, it could be an entirely different conversation than just a single owner restaurant. If you're dealing with things that have been occurring, like you've had a U-pick or you have a farm stand or people come onto your farm, that you have a very different set of legal liabilities that associate with folks coming onto your property than if you were to actually meet your customer at a farmer's market, or you take that product to their homes. So layers of legal issues attach around what market you're trying to get into or trying to stay in, or maybe trying to get back out of if it didn't work out so well. So it's not ever just a financial cost-benefit analysis. There are legal and regulatory cost benefits that need to be determined, but sometimes are a little bit harder to determine. They require more research. They require kind of more digging into very complex, regulatory environments that you may not be up to speed on yet. But if you properly address them, the legal and regulatory issues can be addressed and can be met, and they can increase your profitability if you're willing to take that next step. A lot of the issues that folks face now, this slide that we're looking at right now is not the only list of potential legal issues. There's a whole nother set of legal issues that we could go into, for quite some time, dealing just with things that happen on your farm. But I'm thinking today with producers that are trying to get into new markets that have perhaps a lot more requirements that they scale up, a lot more produce and products that are heading into those markets. The food safety requirements for new markets cannot be underestimated. That's, to me, that would be among my first questions when I'm thinking about entering into a new market, is what are the food safety requirements for the purchasers of my product in those markets. Food safety, you should not stop at FSMA. You should never stop at a tribal, state, or local law or federal law around any particular administrative regulations. We all know on this phone call, likely, that by the end of this year, FDA is going to have a whole new set of produce guidelines and regulations that are going to impact folks who are in that business. Those are going to come by definition with some financial costs for complying with those, as well as some legal requirements for compliance. And so you have to really think about what it is you're producing and where it is you're going with it to determine the food safety requirements for those new markets. And your research needs to encompass, are there tribal, local, state, or federal laws that pertain to that particular product or pertain to being in that particular market. And then not only are you looking at the regulatory, the governmental regulatory arena, you're also looking at what your actual purchaser needs to make them feel comfortable to be in business with you. And so they may actually not care whether you're GAP certified, or they may actually care very much whether you're GAP certified or have a HACCP plan. They may actually want to see it. So there's layers of those kinds of costs that may attach to your doing business in that space. I mentioned the Perishable Ag Commodities Act. It's an act that's often overlooked, but it covers the sale and payment for perishable ag products in the marketplace. The Ag Marketing Service at USDA is really the agency that has the primary responsibility for that particular PACA, is our short term for it. But it covers an entire list of fresh and frozen fruits and vegetables. and it actually attaches to those people who are in that business environment. And it allows folks who actually produce those products to actually have some degree of certainty that they will be paid for those products. So I encourage you to spend some time. It's very easy to Google and pull up PACA under the Ag Marketing Service. They've got an entire list of Q&As and complaint mechanisms for when you haven't been paid. There's licenses to operate in the produce arena that attach in that area. All of the information you need for that is on their website, ams.usda.gov. But you could very easily just cut and paste the PACA, title of the law into any search mechanism and pull up the resources that can get you into that space. But folks very often forget that that is a tool available to help them. If you're in a school or other institutional procurement area, more and more schools now are requiring GAP certification or some other proof that your operation engages in safe and sanitary processes. Every state has safe and sanitary processes on the books, on their legislative books, and so it's very important that you know what those are. And so sometimes, although the legal issues may not impose direct costs other than, say, filing for a permit or filing for a license to do business in that particular industry, it may also, though, attach some requirements in the law about how you do your business, which can, while you are complying with those requirements, impose some additional costs that you may not be aware of because you are not in that sort of business right now. So I would tell you that as you're moving into new spaces, the legal piece is very important. The interstate movement of food and commerce, though, is also one area that is heavily regulated. It always has been. And so it's regulated for a lot of purposes, but most often it's for food safety, health, sanitation, and animal and plant disease protection reasons. And so there are costs associated with any time you are moving food across state lines. Insurance is one of those tools that a lot of folks still overlook. It's critical. Yeah.
I just want to let you know that we're getting close to time, and there are some good questions.
Yeah.
And we did this great webinar on crop insurance for small growers. So feel free to make reference to that.
Yeah, I'm not going to go into very much detail about any of these, other than to say that insurance is a tool that you must have. Vehicle insurance, if you have vehicles, carrier insurance, product liability, general tort liability. All of these are insurance products that are available to you. I have crop insurance in all caps because all producers need to be incorporating that into their business plan, but it does have costs, and they are contracts. Each insurance product that you have, no matter what type it is a contract between you and the party you're buying it from, and each party to that contract has roles and responsibilities. It's important to protect your losses, but also insurance kicks in if you're ever sued in relation to the activity that you purchased the insurance to cover. Those are hidden needs that you have. If you're ever sued, the ability to have someone come in, your insurance company, and help in your representation is critical. And I gave you an example on that slide about tractors. I've got a lot of my own war stories in tractors area, but just understand that you may think you can get by without it, but it is so important to have. So the last slide is really, you cannot be in business without always checking your credit report. It's very critical, and so we always throw in that slide at the very end. And that's it. That's all I have, and we'll move to questions.
Great. Good. Okay, so there are a few questions. We're just going to take a few. We're kind of long on time, but I did want to get a few of these high priority questions in. Actually, I'm gonna, if it's okay, I'm gonna move back to the tractor example because I think that several questions came up around this one, and you might be able to use this to address some of these questions. So, so one question is, if you add more land, doesn't overhead cost increase?
Yeah, this is Gary. If you add more land, the assumption here is I've already got access to this land as Tyler's Tip Top Tomatoes, and I'm just going to put more of it under cultivation. But yes, in general, if you had to buy the land in order to grow more fruits and more vegetables on it, then yeah, that's a separate calculation of a cost-benefit analysis. What am I going to spend for the land? Am I going to get enough production out of that? This example that we're showing is just about the tractor. It assumes I've already got the land. That's not part of this calculation.
Great. All right. Good clarification. Thank you. Susan asks where one can find benchmark figures for specific areas and products.
That's the multi-$1,000 question.
Literally.
It's hard to find it organized in the same way. You can frequently find it from if you Google whatever the crop is that you're looking about for an enterprise budget. So you can find a separate budget maybe for growing carrots or potatoes. There are some great resources that try to combine a lot of this, like the Southern Sustainable Ag Working Group's website, where they have the growing profits courses that they've been teaching for a while that use the Veggie Compass. So there's some, I don't think they advertise it as benchmarked information, but it's pretty reliable, at least for making budgets from, in the Southern Sustainable Ag Working Group. So cooperative extension, local cooperative extensions in your state may have enterprise budgets or sometimes whole farm budgets. That's probably one of the best sources to go to. And then to other groups that are teaching beginning farmer financial skills, which there are many more in the past few years, that sometimes will post these sorts of budgets.
Yeah, Gary, I want to add to that too. The Center for Farm Financial Management at the University of Minnesota, who have relationships with each one of the 4 regional extension risk management education centers. If you go to their websites, they have a lot of benchmarking information, but it is, as you said, it's information that's rolled up from the extension and also from the private farmers who engage in benchmarking activities with that center. So there's a lot of information there as well.
And Abel has the analogous question, which is how do you come up with numbers for the additional revenue generated? Gary, you were talking about Googling for percentage yield increase. I assume these Google works, but also some of these same resources will could have information about additional revenue generated by particular purchases.
Yes, and that's all of the resources we just talked about for finding benchmark information would be similar places to go to find information on. So what am I going to get if I make an investment in irrigation or other productivity increasers like that? And to some degree, you know, you may have an idea. You can guess. This is all budgeting into the future, so you can make what you think is a good guess, and if you can show it on paper like this, then you can more effectively ask your neighbor who's a farmer, you know, or somebody in your network. I think that this sort of a cost-benefit analysis tool is a way to write it down and be able to show it to somebody else, and that person may be a loan officer that you go to and say, is this possible? Does this sound reasonable? Maybe after you ask your friends and neighbors about it. But it's a way to write it down so that you can have other people understand your logic And frequently, I mean, these examples are obviously very bare bones. The more you think about these kinds of cost-benefit analysis, the more you're going to come up with questions like what was asked of us. Where do you find more information? What about the land cost? All of those things are part of thinking this through in a real effective cost-benefit analysis way.
Okay, good. There are a couple more questions, but I think that was a good summation and ending point. So I want to thank you, Gary, Janie, Bo, and John. This was an excellent presentation, fantastic tool. I think several people will be taking these ideas, taking these particular tools, perhaps even taking the PDF and transferring it into Excel, although the calculations are simple enough and might be useful to just sort of do it out in pencil just to get a good feel of how things adjust. To some business owners, it may seem too much trouble or too confusing to leverage core financial data about their business to make optimal decisions, but we think that with this tool, clearly applicable in all sorts of situations, it really simplifies the powerful process of making operational decisions backed with financial data. Simplified to the essence, adding focus without intimidation that some might feel. So this webinar is the final in a series which included a grower's perspective on selling through food hubs, a crash course on crop insurance for small farmers, and creative new models for financing local food businesses. Like those, this webinar is being recorded and will be archived at our site at ngfn.org. In addition to this, the other webinars in this series, there are over 50 other webinars we've done in the past, so feel free to send others who you think might have enjoyed hearing this presentation, and take some professional development time yourself and dig through our excellent archives. They are organized by topic in the left-hand side navigation area. So we should have this up within a few business days. We do offer our NGFN webinars on the third Thursday of each month at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Sign-up links are always posted on ngfn.org/webinars, but make sure you're on our mailing list to hear about our webinars first and to reserve your virtual seat. You can find the National Good Food Network on YouTube, on Twitter, on our website, ngfn.org, and the Wallace Center also has a Facebook site or a page, so come search for Wallace Center at Winrock International. So thank you. This concludes the webinar.